that's what I always come back to is like, okay, what are my actual values? And then how do I act? What's the decision that's most in alignment with those values? And I think that's an important question to always bring yourself back to, whether it be about big life changes or just about your daily routine, right? A lot of moms struggle because they're like, well, I don't have time, or I'm so frantic, everybody needs everything from me. And it's so easy to fall into that like victim mentality where you're like, oh, life is exhausting. And I get it, like it is. I feel that very much too. But I always have to ask myself, like, okay, what am I trying to do here? Am I looking for pity or sympathy or to be a victim? Or am I living the dream that I thought, for my whole life? Like, I'm in it right now. This is the dreams that I dreamed of. Like, I got to stop complaining and like being a victim and start controlling what I can control and ask myself, like, what are my values? I say that family is valuable to me, yet here I am, like, being a victim to my kids and being like, oh, they are crazy and they're ruining my life. You know what I mean? Like, you can't, both of those things can't exist at the same time. You have to be in alignment that way.
Thank you so much for joining me today on the Beyond the Scale podcast. Welcome. I'm so excited to have you here.
I'm super excited to be here. This is fun.
Yeah. So Lydia and I have known each other for, like a year and a half now.
Something like, I think so. Yeah.
It seems so much longer, even though it's like so much has happened in the last year and a half.
Jam-packed year.
Yes. So we both share a common trend in that we do a million things at once. And we just have a lot going on. I really can't think of a better person who can relate to what I'm going through as like a mom and in my career than you. So I'm so happy to have you in my corner.
Yes. I was thinking about that today, like before we jumped on, and I was like, I have friends that I've like known for longer, but I connect with less because they're just in different phases of life. And I feel like you and I have very like parallel phases of life. Like we've both got 2 kids that were like juggling like crazy, and then the business and all of the things. And I think we have like similar personalities as far as like what we expect of ourselves. So I feel like we're like, you just get it.
Oh, definitely. And we're both so hard on ourselves. I know that as well.
Yeah, can be sometimes.
Nice. Yeah, it's nice to have somebody that can say like, dude, give yourself some grace.
Right. I say that to other people all the time, but then like sometimes I have to be like, okay, to myself.
Yeah, me too. I know. We never take our own advice.
Right. I know. I'm trying.
Backstory for our listeners on Lydia and I. So Lydia and her husband, Josiah, used to work for Fit Body Boot Camp up in Michigan. And then they moved to Virginia, and Josiah became our facility leader at our Roanoke Fit Body Boot Camp location. And quickly after, like 6 months after, they both were like, hey, let us buy your Roanoke location. And Trevor and I weren't even thinking about selling that location at all. But, Josiah, like he just kept digging and digging. And so one thing led to the next, and they ended up purchasing our Roanoke location, and they're the owners now, and they do an incredible job. It's already grown so much since they've taken over, and Lydia has 2 young ones, and so their life is like all over the place. Tell me a little bit about your mindset when you decided to take on this new venture. Like, what were you guys thinking? Even before you approached us, like, what was your vision and goal at that point in your life? Like, were you thinking about gym ownership before you even moved to Virginia, before Josiah took over as the facility leader? Were you guys thinking about that?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So it's funny because like people who know us personally laugh because like, this is what we do. We do everything all at once. And that's just, and we're not afraid of like big leaps because we've done it several times. Like we met in college in Virginia and moved to Michigan to work for Fit Body. That was a big leap. And then obviously coming back to Virginia, that was a big leap. And honestly, our trajectory has always been like pointed in this direction. Josiah is a visionary. He's very much like the big picture guy, and I'm very much like the logistics person. So he, from the day I met him, was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to move to Michigan and I'm going to work for FitBody. And then someday I will own my own. And I was like, what? I didn't know what FitBody was. I'm from Pennsylvania, and we didn't have any there, but he had watched like Matt, who, you know, owns several, open up several in his hometown. And he was like, this is what I'm going to do. Like, and I was like, oh, okay, like, we'll see what happens. And sure enough, you know, that's what happened. So we just rolled with it. And it was, gym ownership was always on the radar, especially for him. He was very much like, this is my end game. I want to own a gym. So it's just kind of been a matter of, it's not the what, like we knew that was the end game. It was a matter of like the how and when. So for us, it was just like, okay, whenever the opportunity does avail itself, I think the last several years for us has just been practicing being open to big decisions and practicing big decisions and taking risks and taking leaps. So I think, you know, obviously like right place, right time, but like you said, Josiah is a little bit of like he'll make you about things that you never would have thought about. And then you're like, this is actually a pretty good idea.
He's very convincing. I will say that.
Yes. He is. So, but also in a good way, like he'll convince you to believe in yourself, which is really cool. That's the root of a good coach. But yeah, I mean, so then obviously like end of July, beginning of August is when we transferred things over. And I was 9 months pregnant with our second, Harper, and I had her end of August. So it has been like drinking water from a fire hose. Just like every day I wake up and I'm like, okay, I just feel like my head is just like above the water and I'm treading. Yeah. And I take these little breaths of fresh air, but it's also good because like, that's how I'm wired, is like, right, action, excitement, like let's keep the ball rolling. Let's keep doing things. And I think honestly, like my first year of motherhood really prepared me for that. And just the last, because we had Hudson in 2020, right? And so that was just a huge shift. The whole first year of motherhood was such an identity shift for me, learning what my capacity is. And you think you have high capacity beforehand, and then you become a mom and you're like, my plate just had to grow because there's so much more on it every single day. So that kind of transformation. And now I just say like, man, I got 2 kids. I'm tough as nails. Like nothing will break me.
Exactly. Oh, I love that. Yeah. Well, and you said something really good. Like you and Josiah have always had the mentality that like, no matter what stage of life you're in, you're going to be open to opportunities, open to the possibility. When it came to like gym ownership, that was a terrible time to buy a gym. Like most people looking in would say, are you crazy? Like you're due the same month that you were going to sign over ownership of a fitness studio. Like that. Just wrapping my head around that now, the timing of it is a little wild, but you did it. Like you were open, which brings us to, you know, the theme that I told you I wanted to talk about today is, you know, being in your life and feeling happy and content and just trying to cherish where you're at, but also still be striving for more. I once heard someone say, you know, knowing where, or being able to pump the brakes, but not forgetting where the gas pedal is. Right. And you are really good at that. And I think that there are a lot of moms, especially in that season of life where things are hard and you can get so wrapped up in motherhood and parenthood, and maybe you have a traditional 9-to-5 job and you feel like that is all you can take on, but you still have these dreams. I like to say God-sized dreams. Like you still have these God-sized dreams, but you don't even know like if that's possible anymore. And it's just, it's hard, but it is. You've shown everyone, and we both, like, we have done things that most people would say are impossible. And maybe or
that we even probably thought were impossible, right? At some point. And I will never forget, like, we stayed in the hospital for 2 days after I had Harper, and we both like just brought our laptops and worked. Like we were just like, we had a 28-day trial starting that Monday. Like we had stuff to do. We're like calling people like, hey, you know, whatever for their memberships. And like, I wouldn't have it any other way. Like I got a 6-week maternity leave with Hudson, and I felt like it wasn't enough. I was so like nervous about going back to work, even though I was working from home at the time. And then this time, as a business owner, there is no maternity leave. And we were working from the hospital, and like newborns sleep. This is the best time to get it done anyways. Like it's fine. And so I'll never forget that. But yeah, like I think as far as like balancing that balance between striving and contentment, these seem like opposing forces. And a lesson that I've had to learn and relearn over my adult life, I think, is that seemingly opposite things can coexist at the same time without fighting each other. And the first time I had to learn this was actually when we moved from Virginia to Michigan back in 2018. It was January. We moved to Michigan in January. 0 out of 10 recommend. It was cold. So, but I remember taking the pictures down in our first apartment, and I was so sad. Like I loved this apartment. I loved Virginia, and there's so much unknown on the other side of it. And I was like, how can leaving a good thing ever be a good thing? And I remember calling my mom, and I was like, Mom, like, I don't know what we're doing. This is going to be terrible. And she goes, Lydia, sometimes the greatest joy can exist at the same time as the greatest sadness. She said, I remember cleaning out the tub in our first apartment that I gave you kids your first baths in, and I was sobbing. And she goes, but we were moving out of a good situation into another good situation. And she was like, just because you can't see the good on the other side yet doesn't mean it's not there, and doesn't mean like it's not going to be just as good, if not better. And just I always says, without change, there is no growth. So I think that balance, and a lot of times we have this polarizing thing. Well, I either have to feel sad or happy, or I either have to be content or goal driven. And it's like, no, man, both of those things can coexist. And sometimes it's just a matter of giving yourself that permission to let them coexist. I'm not sure what I was thinking, but.
Yeah, no, that's totally right. And also, like, there's going to be some areas in your life where you're going to feel very content, and then other areas where you feel like you're striving for more, and that's okay. Like you don't have to be in the same spot in all areas of your life at all times. Similar experience with us. So we lived closer to one of our studios, to our Blacksburg studio, a few years ago, and we decided, let's move back closer to family. Let's move to Roanoke. Let's move closer to the Roanoke facility. That's where I'm from. That was my original goal, to move back home eventually. Well, we put our house on the market, sold it within a day. And it was one of those things where I still wasn't completely set on moving. Like we threw out the idea, we put our house on the market, thought if it sells, it sells. No, it's sold in a day. And so then, it's like, okay, we're really moving. And at the same time, we had become really close with our next door neighbors. We had lived there for over a year, never even really spoke to them. And then all of a sudden, as we're starting to move away, we've become great friends with our neighbors. We have both of us had daughters that were the same age. They love to play after school every day. And I remember one night sitting out, it was Halloween. It was like 5 days before we were supposed to move. And I was pregnant with Stone. And so, the emotions are heightened. But I just sat there and sobbed because I didn't want to move. And I was so scared about this next chapter of my life. And I just remember even my mom too, and Trevor, just being like, listen, you wanted to move. Like, it's a good thing. Like, good things are going to happen. Like, sure, you're going to be sad. But if you want to be closer to family, if you want the things that you said you want, like, this is the next step we have to take. And
I love that you said that, because that's what always is my compass. Whenever it comes to change and big decisions, and even just like recentering and like refocusing, because I feel like as moms and, people who, if you have goals and you have things for your life, you're goal driven, but you're also a mom. Like, so it can feel very conflicting when you feel off center. I always come back to and like refocus on like, okay, what are my values? What do I say I want? And then how is my behavior in alignment with those values? And we talk about this with fitness and nutrition all the time too, right? People who say like, they say, I want to get stronger, I want to eat better, I want to do this. And then we as coaches look and we say, okay, well, here's what you're saying you want. And then here's what you're proving you want, with your actions. That's what I always come back to is like, okay, what are my actual values? And then how do I act? What's the decision that's most in alignment with those values? And I think that's an important question to always bring yourself back to, whether it be about big life changes or just about your daily routine, right? A lot of moms struggle because they're like, well, I don't have time, or I'm so frantic, everybody needs everything from me. And it's so easy to fall into that like victim mentality where you're like, oh, life is exhausting. And I get it, like it is. I feel that very much too. But I always have to ask myself, like, okay, what am I trying to do here? Am I looking for pity or sympathy or to be a victim? Or am I living the dream that I thought, for my whole life? Like, I'm in it right now. This is the dreams that I dreamed of. Like, I got to stop complaining and like being a victim and start controlling what I can control and ask myself, like, what are my values? I say that family is valuable to me, yet here I am, like, being a victim to my kids and being like, oh, they are crazy and they're ruining my life. You know what I mean? Like, you can't, both of those things can't exist at the same time. You have to be in alignment that way.
It's hard not to do that. And often, I know you do this too. It's like sometimes we publicly post on social media about a struggle that we're having. And I never do it to complain. I do it to show other people that I'm struggling with this. And I know there's others that are struggling too. And we can all get through this together. And like, here's how I'm combating this in my life. And I think too often we see people complaining or we see people talking about an obstacle, but they don't actually have a solution to get on the other side of that. And that's hard to just get stuck in that cycle of, like you said, playing the victim or using everything that we have going on in our life as a way to validate not working out, not taking care of ourselves, and just, staying in that place. And that's very difficult. And, going off of that, you really have in the last few years developed a passion for nutrition and helping other people, other moms in particular, just kind of figure out what works for them, create a plan based on where they're at, that that no matter what, they can succeed. Talk about that a little bit. So it's the U method. Yeah. You guys have been doing this for 2 years, 3 years?
Yes. So we started in 2021. So only a year and change. So like a year and a half now. Yeah. Okay. So that was kind of like a dream I've always had, is just being able to have that option to help people from anywhere. And it ebbs and flows. It's something that I'm like, sometimes really have the capacity to focus on. And other times I'm like, with the gym and, still working through how those are both balanced in each other. But ultimately, like, I will always be a coach at heart. And I do have that passion for nutrition. And a lot of people think that nutrition coaching means you have this like magical set of knowledge that like nobody else has. Just like, tell me what foods I should eat. Like, people think it's this mystery that you have somehow unlocked or this secret. But the more I do it, the more I realize and want to inform people is that nutrition coaching is really just habit coaching. It's not about like this magical list of foods that you should or shouldn't eat. Like, we all know what's generally healthy and what's not. It's really more so habit coaching. And that's how I would describe what we do at the U Method, is actually more habit coaching it through your nutrition, through your fitness. But understanding like, okay, let's say, you have these goals. Let's see what your habits are looking like and what can we adjust to, get you there, and how to do it in a very simple, realistic way. Everybody's always looking for the magic pill, the secret sauce, the answer that it needs to be uncovered. But really it comes down to what can you do consistently for the long term? And I think, all or nothing thinking is the enemy of us all. That's the thing that I'm always coming back to. If you follow me or the U Method on social, that's like what every post ends up being about, is like, you got to stop with the all or nothing thinking, right? Something is better than nothing. Simple and consistent is always going to be complex and sporadic. And I preach it because that was me. Like, I was a chronic dieter, like every, female in her 20s who, in college, that was always what I was doing. I was like, oh, maybe I'll try this. Maybe I'll try that. And like, people would look at me at the time and be like, oh, well, you don't need to, but I had this like passion for, I wanted to live healthier, but I didn't know, I didn't have the knowledge. So I was always diet hopping. I was like, I thought the goal was to be like this perfect eater, or to like only eat clean. Right. But that, isn't true. You learn over time that it's not sustainable. I was, like I said, I was always on the wagon or off the wagon, or on the diet or off the diet. And I remember being so like, frustrated, because I was like, why can't I stick to anything? Why am I always like, why don't I have more discipline? Like, I just want to be the kind of person. And I remember having this kind of come to Jesus moment in my apartment. And I was like, I just want to be the kind of person who can like have I used to shop at Trader Joe's when we lived in Michigan. And they have these like dark chocolate peanut butter cups that I love. They're so good. And I remember telling myself, like, I just want to be the kind of person who can buy these and like keep them in the house, but not like obsess over it, or be like, I have to have one now. Like, and I was always the person who like couldn't keep that stuff in the house without like thinking about it 24/7. And that was kind of a light bulb moment for me, because it was the first time I thought about, instead of saying like, I got to force myself to do this or do that, it was the time where I shifted my mindset for, instead of focusing on what I have to do or not do, it was, who do I have to become? Who do I have to be in order to see the results that I want in my life? And I'm not talking about like physical results. I'm talking about like mental, emotional, the whole thing. Like, what kind of person must I become in order to have the outcomes that I'm looking for? Because ultimately, we don't have control over the outcome, right? We don't have control over our scale weight. We don't have control over our body fat. We, like, if I told you like, okay, go lose weight, he's like, okay, that's not an action, that's an outcome, right? I need to work on, what are the actions? Who must I become in order to achieve those outcomes, rather than just like focusing on the list of things to do or not do, because that's what the diet industry sells, is like, you got to either do this or don't do that, or eat this or don't eat that. But really, it comes down to, who must you become? How can we shift that identity so that you start believing you are that person? For me, it was running things through the filter of, okay, what would she do? Like, if I were that girl, what decisions would she make right now? And that's how you shift your mindset. That's how you shift your habits. And I could rant about that all day long. But in short, that's really what my passion is for when it comes to habit change.
Yeah, well, and I think a lot of health coaches, they're in the position they're in today because they had a similar experience. Like, I was the same in college. I was so focused on working out, and if I was in a sorority, so of course we had our fun on the weekends. But if we had our fun on the weekends, I was thinking about, even before I had fun, okay, how many calories am I going to be consuming, and how can I work them off? How can I make sure that I'm exercising so much that it's like it never even happened? My go-to snack late night in college was Campbell's tomato soup. Like, how embarrassing is that? Like, everyone else was eating Jimmy John's and pizza, and I would have Campbell's soup, and I would drink those Slim Fast shakes in a can. I don't even think they make those anymore. Oh, man. I would actually buy those canned Slim Fast, and then I would take a frozen banana and I would put it in the blender and have like my banana, like my, smoothie. That was a cheap option. I couldn't afford a big tub of protein in college.
Yeah. No, I'm the same way. Tuna, I would get canned tuna for like 90 cents or something like that.
Yeah, I would just get whatever I could, keep it in my room. But yeah, the all or nothing mentality, like, I've definitely been there. And for me, like, talking about the habits and how you can stack them up and make sure that you're working towards that outcome of that person that you want to be. Something that I've been thinking about a lot lately is that I don't have a consistent routine every day. Like, my day every day is different. And I cannot sit here and tell you, like, every Monday I will work out at this time, and on Tuesday I do this, and on Wednesday I do this. My life just does not operate like that right now.
Right.
However, I do have daily habits that I fit into my schedule that they are my non-negotiables. Like I try to get 30 minutes of movement every single day, whether that is take my dog for a walk, go to Fit Body Boot Camp, work out in the basement. Like I try to do that every day. It's never going to be at the same time. Like I can't tell you how many nights, like Sunday night, I will say, I am going to go to boot camp at, 6:15 every day this week. What do you know? Tuesday night, a kid gets the cold or, something happens. I don't make it on Wednesday. And then my whole week feels like it's been train wrecked. But in reality, like, does it really matter if you work out at that same time every day? No, it's going to get that workout in. Yes. And even with the exercise, I used to look at taking my dog for a walk as like a bonus workout. I never looked at it as, oh, this can be my 30 minutes of movement this day. Like I used to think I need to be killing myself in the gym for it to count as a workout. And I don't think that it took me being a mom to really realize that like, that's just not sustainable. Like I can't live that all or nothing life anymore. It's never going to work. Yeah. And so you got to take what you can get.
Mm-hmm. I always feel like there's the ideal and then there's the real. Like don't sacrifice the real for the ideal. And I think we have a lot of like these shoulds like in our lives, especially for women, especially for moms. We all have like the list of shoulds running through our head. And I always tell my clients like should is a shame word. Those things are all associated. Like should always is underneath that is shame. So we shame ourselves for not doing enough. But in reality, sometimes we have to like change our definition of what is enough or change your definition of what counts. And I think everybody goes through that where they're like, oh, it only counts if I'm dripping sweat, or it only counts if I'm, working really hard or burn 400 calories. It's like, no, man, like how realistic is that? And then that mindset, that standard that's impossible, always ultimately leads to you falling short of it and then going back into that yo-yoing where you're like, I have this super high standard. Oh, missed it. Oh, I'm a failure. And then you just spiral, right? Whereas if you're just every day focused on like, okay, one step forward. And like, I'm the same way. I'm somebody who thrives off of routine, but how much routine do I really get to have in my life? Like, especially like Harper's 3 months old. Like, I wish she had a schedule, but she don't. Like, it's not like I can rely on that daily like nap time anymore or things like that. So just like you said, I just have my list of like, okay, whether it happens at 10 a.m. or 10 p.m., here's what needs to happen for me to be me today, or for me to feel like I took a step forward. And then obviously assessing, like, don't make those things ridiculous. Like, don't make your non-negotiables like this insane list. But like simple, like, okay, whether it happens at 8 a.m. or 8 p.m, I just have to make sure I'm getting some kind of movement in for my day. And like you said, 30 minutes is usually my non-negotiable as well. And I like the idea of movement rather than exercise, because yes, we love exercise. We want to get exercise in. That intentional heart rate is up, sweat is happening. This is good, right? But also movement is part of the standard as well. And I tend to tell people to focus on daily movement instead of exercise, because if you're making that movement a part of your daily routine, the exercise will happen. That box will get checked, right? But if you're moving, like, the momentum keeps going. And I think that momentum is really the most important part when it comes to feeling like yourself or having a little bit of routine in your life. It's more about momentum than it is about schedule and, being really strict with things.
Oh, definitely. And it's so easy to get off track and lose your momentum. And that's where I think, like, you stack your wins and your losses and those start to compound, and then it's easier to keep the momentum to keep going. But I do think that we're in a culture right now where we're sharing, like, you see so much that people are sharing about their routine, about their daily habits and things that are working for them. And say that you're not in that phase right now. Like, say you're new to exercise or you're new to a weight loss journey or a health and wellness journey, and you see what these other people who've had great success are doing, and you get so discouraged if what they're doing doesn't work for them. And it's just finding your own path and finding your own way when there's so much noise out there that's saying, this is like, I'm sure you've seen on Instagram, look at my daily routine. Those crack me up.
They drive me nuts.
They, first off, they're usually like they're usually models. Like these ladies look like supermodels to me.
Who are they? Yeah, I know. I think they're getting paid for these morning routine reels.
The green like celery smoothies that they're making, you know, and then they're journaling, and then they're lighting a candle, and then they're taking a bubble bath in the middle of the day.
I know. I'm like, okay, I always look at them, I'm like, how many hours does this take for you to get done?
Right. But my point is we're some people, I'm not in this category. But I was in this group when I was like, social media wasn't as big as it is today. But I used to look to people like that and say, okay, if they can do it, I can do it. I want to do it just like them. I want to be just like them. I want to be this person. And I don't know like when this shift happened, but I am so focused on being the best Mary Katherine, the best that I can be, and not someone else. Like that is what I'm focused on right now, because there is so many people trying to be other people, and it's exhausting. It's so exhausting.
Yeah. And I think that mindset shift happens because I was the same way, like very much like, I gotta be the best. Like I gotta have that, it girl. And that was like a trend on TikTok. I think this summer was like the it girl or something like that. And it was those videos, these like little snapshots of their routine. And it's like, you want to know my morning routine? It's like one of the kids cries and I roll out of bed and I'm like, oh, here we go. That's about it, and there's other routines that happen throughout the day, but that doesn't diminish the significance of them, right? Like, and I think the shift happened for me of trying to uphold other people's standards to creating my own standards. That shift happens when you develop that momentum and when you feel your confidence grows, when you prove to yourself that you are the person who you said you were going to be, right? A lot of people want like confidence, or they're like, I want to have a better self-image or self-esteem, right? And like they want to feel better about themselves. It's like, okay, that doesn't come from looking in the mirror and being like, I'm beautiful, or like doing your routines that somebody else posted about on Instagram. Being confident in yourself comes from doing things that prove that you should be confident. And I think for me as a mom, and probably same for you, that confidence comes when you like got reps in, like you're doing the reps and you've got a couple months under your belt of like, okay, like I've got this momentum going. I don't need anybody else to tell me what the target is. Like I feel more confident in myself because I've been proving to myself that I am the person that I said I was going to be. So it doesn't come from like telling yourself to be more confident. It comes from just like taking the step. And then you're looking back at this track record of yesterday's where you're like, oh, you know what? I did what I said I was going to do. I want to do it again. And then that momentum builds. And then, you've got several months on your belt where you're just like, I've been doing the dang thing. And then you feel like, I don't need anybody else to tell me how to do this or whatever. And, it comes back to that, the balance of shoulds. And I think for moms, we spend a lot more time on social media, maybe because motherhood tends to be a little isolating, like because you have these people who rely on you so much. So, and then like with little babies, you're just up in the middle of the night scrolling. Like we spend that time on social media. So then we tend to think like, this is what everybody else is doing. Like I need to stick to that standard. It's like, no, that's not what everybody else is doing. That's what everybody else is posting. But if you're removed from community, which I'm one to talk because like I hang out with no one, I hang out with my children. So I find it very easy to fall into that mindset of like, oh my gosh, like I'm not keeping up with this standard. There's one more thing that I'm just falling short of. And I have to snap back and remind myself, like, that's not the standard, man. That's what people are posting about. I just got to pave my own path. I got to keep going down whatever road that I'm supposed to be on. And it's hard. It's hard to grow in confidence in that. But I think that you get confidence from doing things scared, like do it scared, do it wrong. Like, and then, the confidence comes after getting the reps in.
Definitely. Yeah. Confidence comes from taking action. Like you said,
right.
Once I had the great fortune of hearing Jamie Kern Lima, the founder of It Cosmetics, speak a few months back. And she was talking about this exact topic. She was talking about momentum and keeping your momentum. And she was saying that a lot of times people get a little taste of success and then they lose it. And she said, don't do that. Like stay in it. Like don't let, you lose 10 pounds, you lose 15 pounds and you feel good. Don't think, oh, now I can go back to my old ways. Or, life starts getting easier in motherhood. Your kids start sleeping through the night. You start staying up late and binge watching Netflix, which of course I am guilty of all these things at times. Right. But don't think life's easy now, because life's not easy. There's always going to be something else that comes your way. So don't think that it's good and you can cruise. Like, you have to just keep building that momentum until you become ultimately invincible. Yeah. And that's where we all want to get to, is to a point where, nothing bothers us anymore. And we're just firing off everywhere.
Yeah. I, a couple of years ago, I try to bring in a focus. A lot of people do a word of the year. And I like that concept. And, over time it's shifted to just sort of a focus of the year and an idea. A couple of years ago, I decided that I was going to be the queen of consistency. Right. And that was my title for myself, because I wasn't very consistent. And I recognized that in my life. And I was like, all my problems are because I'm not a very consistent person. So I'm going to be the queen of consistency. And that's what I decided to do. I'm just going to be consistent. So I always visualize it as okay, you picture kind of a tree in a storm, and it's just not moving, man. It's just there. Or I see on a graph, and I'm a very visual thinker. So I have little pictures in my mind for everything. But I see on a graph, there's just this steady line, and that's going to be me and my habits and my routines and the things that I'm focused on that are going to move the needle forward. I'm the steady line, and there's a squiggly line, right? And that's the ups and downs of life. There's going to be emotions. How I feel about the process is going to change. I might wake up one day feeling like I'm killing it, and then the next day feeling like I'm a huge failure and nothing is going right. And recognize that those feelings are going to be the ups and downs, right? The life events, the seasons of life. So many people let that trip them up, right? They're like, I'll get back at it when life calms down. It's like, newsflash, it won't. The seasons of life are the ups and downs. So I see okay, I got to be that steady line. Let the other stuff go up and down. Let that happen. Recognize that there's going to be stuff outside of your control that is going to make you feel like swaying, right? But you have to stay focused and you have to stay steady. And that visual has helped me get through a lot of the emotion. And I tend to be somebody who's okay, well, I have to acknowledge emotion isn't bad. That's fine. I'm allowed to have feelings about this, but feelings aren't facts. I'm not going to act on those feelings necessarily. This is mom 101, right? When you have a toddler and you have to tell them you're allowed to feel upset, but you're not allowed to hit your sister, or you're not allowed to throw a tantrum in the middle of Target. And it's so hard to
hit my body is what we tell Sophia.
Yes, we use our hands for hugging and not for hitting. And how many times we have to teach ourselves those lessons? It's okay, I'm allowed to feel upset, but I'm not allowed to quit. Or I'm allowed to be angry about this, but I'm not allowed to, throw a fit about it, and we have to have the same conversations. I always say we're just big toddlers who have just learned what socially acceptable is, over time. But as toddlers, you can so see that it's man, dude, I struggle with that too. I want to scream too, man. Yeah. And it's how do I self-regulate and say okay, I'm allowed to feel like I'm not making progress, or I'm allowed to, feel like the process is too difficult, but that doesn't give me permission to give up, or that doesn't mean I need to act on those feelings. And that's something we say in our household all the time, Josiah and I, to each other. Okay, I'm feeling this right now. I want to get it out of my head. I want to get it out of my soul. But feelings aren't facts. That doesn't mean we're going to do anything about it. I just want to get that out there. And we have to say that to each other.
I like that. Feelings are not facts. It's just temporary pain, right?
Right. Exactly. And that's not to say oh, you're not allowed to feel some type of way, or you're not allowed to struggle. I think for me, sometimes I put that standard on myself is you're not allowed to struggle. No feelings. Push through. I've just always been, some people like to dig into their childhood and try to blame things on their parents. I don't believe in that. I don't think it's very productive unless obviously there are some situations where it's yes, you were in a very traumatizing situation. That's just always been my personality is okay, I try to not make my feelings other people's problems. And sometimes it causes me to just like shut down completely and not share anything and not allow myself permission to feel anything and just be like, I'm fine until like a breakdown happens.
Yes.
So that's not the goal ultimately. So I'm not saying like, oh, be rigid. You're not allowed to, feel the exhaustion of motherhood or the exhaustion of when you're on some kind of journey trying to improve your health. Like, yeah, it's going to be hard. Yes, we can recognize that. So put that out in the open, but also understand what's productive and what's not. And I think it's more common knowledge now. A lot of people say like, okay, do you need me to just listen right now or do you want a solution? And I think that's a good conversation to have with yourself too. Like, do I just need to vent right now or do I need to like find a solution? And these are good questions. These are good questions to ask.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Going back to like your theme of the year, mine for 2023 is being present. And in order for me to do that, I have found that I need to simplify my life. And I don't mean that I am going to push aside any big goals that I have, but I'm finding that I'm in a season of life where I just can't take on everything. And what I do take on, I want to be able to give 100%, like to the best of my ability. And it's just like, I used to be the yes person. Like I used to just always say yes to everything. I joined this networking group in Roanoke that I thought I would love to be in. And they had monthly meetings and outings that you had to go to. And there was like requirements in order to be in this group. I did the new member group, the new member year, it went well. And then this year was like every time there was a meeting, I had a conflict. And so finally I'm like, okay, something has got to give. I cannot be in everything. Yeah. And I'm in that season where it's like, whatever I'm doing, it needs to be worth it. Like I need to be developing professionally or personally. It needs to bring me joy. It does not need to be something that is going to stress me out. Just another thing to add to my to-do list. I just can't take it on right now.
Yeah, those high ROI things only.
Yeah. And that's not to say like we shouldn't be scheduling in time with our friends or like, going out for like date nights and things like that. But just any extra things, like you really need to think about how that's benefiting you in this stage of motherhood and this stage of life.
Right. And what's so funny is that like from the outside looking in, it's funny to hear your perspective on that because like, obviously like I know you and I follow you on social media. So like from the outside looking in, I'm like, man, like, MK, she's killing it. She does it all. She's like, I got to step up my game. Like that's what other people see. And it's like, how many times do we do that? And you don't even realize that you're doing it. You're just like sharing your life, but it's just a snapshot of it because you're not going to get on and be like, guys, I'm exhausted. Like you're internally processing all of that. But from the outside looking in, I'm like, oh shoot, man. Like how does she have time for a social life? Like I can barely brush my teeth every day. So, it's just coming back to that, like, I got to recognize what's for me in this season and act in alignment with those values. Always, and it always comes back to that. How do I act in alignment with those values? And people might be listening to this at different times of the year, but, we're coming to the end of this year and the New Year's coming up. So a lot of people think about resetting their goals. And that's something I always do. Sometimes it's the middle of the summer, whatever time of year, right? Like I'll sit down if I'm ever feeling this dissonance in my soul of like, oh, I feel, and you know what it feels like, right? As a mom, as a wife, as a person, there's this dissonance feeling where you're like, it feels like every day you're out of breath. And I find myself like, I forgot to breathe today. Anytime I've got like that feeling in my soul going on for several months, I know it's time to sit down, probably with pen and paper, because I like to get things out that way, and just re-ask myself, like, what are my values? Who do I want to be? What kind of person do I want to become? Not what are my goals, not what do my routines need to be, but what are my values? What do I say matters to me? And then how do we reverse engineer our life to fit in with those values? And then just understanding that you don't have to take on other people's values because they might be in a different season than you. This was a big one for me. I spent a year, just at home, doing the U method. But it's a tiny business, we weren't like growing. Like I went from full-time work to pretty much full-time mom. And that was a big identity struggle for me because productivity is something that like I feel like I get a lot of value in. And just being a mom, or like being a stay-at-home mom, was a very hard like mental shift, because I felt like I was never doing enough. And that was a dissonance in my soul kind of season, where I had to sit down and say, okay, what do I say is a big value for me? I say it's very valuable for me to spend this year with my first kid. Like, I say it's very valuable for me to be a mom, yet every day, like, I'm trying to say that that's not enough. And it's like, how can I shift my mentality to actually dial things back and say, this is enough because it's something that I value. So how do I restructure my routines in my life to point to, these are my values? Somebody will say, like, show me your bank account and I'll show you your values, right? And it's kind of the same thing, right? Show me your daily habits and I'll show you your values. Show me your daily routines and I'll show you your values. And it's like, how do those line up? And if there is dissonance, if those are out of alignment, maybe it is time to sit down and just reassess and say, like, whoa, I'm spending a lot of time on things that don't really matter to me. And that happens because we take on things, right? We have expectations, and that's what we do as women, as mothers. Like, we want to make everybody happy, but at what cost, you know?
I love that. I really actually I needed that, because I'm in this stage right now. I would say it's just the growing pains of owning your own business and growing your family at the same time. When I started Fit Body Bootcamp 5 years ago, I wasn't even thinking about kids. My husband was working, Trevor was working as a PTA. I was doing boot camp, like one studio. We were happy with that. And so we talked about, well, let's try to have a kid. Like, let's try to have kids right now. And I was 26 years old when we had that conversation. And I thought, sure, like, that's fine. And back then I thought to myself, wow, the glory of having your own business is I'll be able to be a mom and stay home more and have the coaches at the gym, and it'll be fine. You know, I'll go in here and there. Well, no, like, literally the week before I had Sophia, we decided we're going to move to a brand new facility that's going to require twice the amount of staffing. It's going to cost twice as much. Like, all of these things were changing. And I didn't think about how I was going to fit a kid into this equation. And so life got so crazy. And now I'm stepping back looking like, I do the same as you. Is sometimes I say, oh, am I doing enough for my business? Am I doing enough for my family? Like, you're questioning all of these things and you're trying to validate it. But going back to 5 years ago, when I made that choice to get pregnant with Sophia and have my business, I did say it was important to me to be able to be a mom, be a present mom, but also have a career at the same time. And so if you do look at my day, I'm not going to say I balance it great every day, but I am trying to balance it in a way where I am giving effort to both areas each day. Mm-hmm. And that has taken some serious practice, but that is one of my values. Like, that is what I wanted. Like, right. I wanted this. So I can't get mad when, something goes wrong, or if it gets really hard, because I put myself in this situation. Like, I wanted it. Yeah. I didn't realize like some of the challenges that were going to come with it. But right. At the end of the day, I'm blessed. I'm blessed to be able to do both of these things at the same time. And I truthfully do think 5 years from now, when my kids are in like third grade and life has gotten a little bit easier, I'm going to look back and be like, phew, man, I can't believe I did that. And I think a lot of people are going to feel like that. I know you're going to feel like that.
Yeah, no, 100%. One of the things you said reminded me of this. It was kind of a groundbreaking thing that I saw the other day. I wish I had the name of this lady that I follow. She's like a psychologist, I think. And she posted a reel about guilt, and like mom guilt. And I think a lot of times we all are like, oh, I feel guilty. It's like, before I was a mom, I didn't get it. I was like, why would any mom feel guilty? Like, they're superheroes, they're doing all the things. And then I became a mom, and it's like, oh, when I don't spend time with my kid, I feel guilty that I'm not with them. When I am with them, I feel guilty that I'm not doing other stuff. It's like always this guilt. And she posted about how there's a difference between deserved guilt and undeserved guilt. And she's like, deserved guilt is actually a good thing. That's called having a moral conscience. That means that there's some value or some standard that's a reasonable, realistic value or standard in your life that you are not acting in alignment with, you should feel guilty about those kinds of things. Like when you're doing, guilt comes from doing something wrong. Then there's the undeserved guilt, where we have a standard or an expectation that is unrealistic and it's too high for ourselves, or it's somebody else's standards, somebody else's expectation that we're taking on unnecessarily. And then we feel guilty about it. That's undeserved guilt. And I was like, boom, mind blown. Like, there are some things that I should feel guilty about. For example, if I say that it matters to be present, like you said, if I say that it matters to be present with my kid, yet I'm on my phone the entire time I'm with them because I feel like I have to do all, working mom and all stay-at-home mom at the same time, I should feel guilty about that. So I should have this conversation with like, how can I separate these two things as within reason? Obviously, like there's times where I'm like, gotta answer an email or gotta, it's like, okay, I should feel guilty when I'm out of alignment with some of the values that I have. I shouldn't feel guilty when I've got these crazy, unrealistic expectations. They're not very productive, and it's just me taking on everything. Those are things that's like, okay, I shouldn't feel guilty. But I think a lot of times people are like, oh, mom guilt, it's so bad. Like, you should never feel guilty. It's like, not necessarily. Like, sometimes guilt is your soul saying, there's a value here that we said we had, and we're not acting in alignment with that,
Definitely. Yeah. And I think it for me, I always say, like, does it serve me? Like, does this thing serve you in your values, in your life, like in whatever, like, is taking on something else or, doing this thing actually going to serve your purpose and fulfill your values, like you said. I feel like we could talk about this stuff all day long.
Talk about just like everything.
Yeah, I really do. And I feel like you're just one person that like you can just talk about anything. So
I could actually tree, and like this is the thing, I go deep very fast. Like I think this is why I don't have a lot of like super close, not super close, but I don't think I have like a ton of social life because I can't do surface level. Like I have to do like, if I can't talk to you about like real stuff, like raw things, and get like theoretical about it, then it's like, it's boring.
Yeah. You don't like small talk. I don't really either.
No, yeah, I can do it, but it's kind of like,
Well, Lydia, thank you so much for being on Beyond the Scale today. I know I got a ton of value from this episode, and I know our listeners will too. Where can our listeners find you on social media?
Yeah, the easiest place is on the gram, on good old Insta. I think I've been on Instagram since like it started, and I haven't deleted too much from my profile, so you can scroll for days. I'm at Lyd, LYD _VB, and I just like. There's nothing I'm really trying to sell on there or do anything crazy. I just like to share and like have a little bit of community. Cause again, like motherhood can be really isolating. I think business ownership can be really isolating. So I tend to like just share the things that I say the things that we're all thinking, but a lot of people don't want to say. So I love connecting with people on there. And then if you want to follow the U method for a lot of like the nutrition habit change content, that's at the U method, YOU, like you as a person, .co, C-O, on Instagram and Facebook as well. But you can always link that through finding me. Just come find me, come hang out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.